I came home for Christmas and found my family gone to Europe, leaving me alone with Grandpa and a note saying I had to care for him. When Grandpa asked, "Shall we begin?" I nodded. 1 week later, they came back screaming. The house was dark when the Uber's headlights swept across the driveway, and that's the detail that still gets me. Not the note, not the folder, not the sheriff's notice taped to the door a week later. The dark house. Every Christmas of my life, our house on Wexford Lane looked like a runway strip. String lights wrapped 3 times around the porch columns because Dad refused to hire anyone to do it right. Mom's inflatable snowman wheezing in the yard, the kitchen windows glowing orange with whatever she was burning that year. That night, December 21st, there was one light on, a single lamp in the front window, casting a small yellow circle onto the snow. I dragged my suitcase up the driveway through 6 inches of powder, the wheels catching and dragging, and I remember thinking, they're at the neighbors, they're doing the thing where they walk over for eggnog and forget the porch light. I was 22 years old, and I still wanted, badly, for there to be a boring explanation. There wasn't one. I opened the door with my spare key, and the house exhaled cold air at me, like it had been holding its breath. No tree lights blinking, no radio, no Dad wrestling extension cords in the living room and swearing at Caleb to hand him the pliers. Just my grandfather, Walter Higgins, 81 years old, sitting in his rocking chair by the one lit lamp, hands folded in his lap like he'd been expecting me for hours. On the coffee table sat a note in my mother's loopy, self-satisfied handwriting. "Avery, we went to Europe for Christmas. You stay and care for Grandpa. Don't be dramatic. Back after New Year's." Mom, I read it twice. The cold didn't come from the open door behind me. It came from somewhere lower, somewhere in my chest, dropping through me like a stone through ice water. They'd called me 11 times in November, all 3 of them, taking turns. "Please come home this year, Avery. It won't be the same without you. We miss you." I'd canceled a trip to Vermont with my roommate to be here. I'd bought presents. I had a new sweater in my suitcase I'd picked out specifically because Mom liked green, and they'd left me as unpaid help for the one relative none of them could stand to be alone with. Grandpa watched me read the note twice. He didn't say anything until I looked up. "Shall we begin?" he asked. I should have called an Uber straight back to the airport. Instead, I nodded. I didn't know yet what I was agreeing to. I thought I was agreeing to make him dinner and watch the History Channel for 9 days. I was wrong about almost everything that night, but I wasn't wrong about the cold in my chest. That part turned out to be the smartest thing in me. I need to back up because none of this makes sense unless you understand what our family actually was underneath the Christmas cards. My name is Avery Voss. I'm the older of my parents' 2 kids. My brother Caleb is 19, a sophomore at a state school he's flunking out of slowly and expensively. My dad, Richard Voss, runs an independent financial consulting business out of a rented office suite in Hartford, the kind of business where the website looks more successful than the bank account. My mom, Diane, doesn't work, hasn't in years, and has a talent, a genuine professional grade talent, for making other people feel guilty for things that were never their fault. Grandpa Walter is my dad's father. He built a hardware supply distribution company from a single truck in 1974 and sold it in 2009 for enough money that if he'd been careful, and he was always careful, that was sort of his whole personality, he'd never have to worry about anything again. He moved into a condo near us 3 years ago after Grandma died, and from the moment he arrived, my parents treated him like a chore with a pulse. I'd noticed things over the years, small things. The way Dad's tone changed on the phone whenever the account came up, then dropped to a murmur if I walked into the room. The way Mom volunteered, a little too eagerly, to handle Dad's mail when Grandpa was in the hospital for a hip replacement 2 years ago. The way Caleb got a truck for his 18th birthday that nobody in our family could remotely afford, paid for, Dad said, by an early inheritance thing. Don't worry about it. I told myself it was nothing. Rich people, or people who wanted to seem rich, always had money noise around them. I was 22 in my first year out of college, working an entry-level marketing job in Boston, and I had my own life to worry about. It wasn't my business how my parents managed Grandpa's affairs. That's what I told myself anyway. Every single time something felt off, I was wrong. But I didn't know how wrong until day 3. By day 2 of that Christmas week, something had already started to bother me, and it wasn't the abandonment. It was Grandpa. He was supposed to be frail. That was the entire premise of the note. Care for Grandpa, like he was an invalid who couldn't be trusted alone with the stove. But on the morning of the 22nd, I came downstairs at 8 to find him already up, already dressed, standing at the kitchen counter grinding his own coffee beans in a hand grinder he must have brought from his condo, because we sure didn't own one. "Morning," he said without turning around. "There's enough for 2 if you want it." I stood in the doorway in my socks, genuinely disoriented. "I thought you needed help getting around." "I need help being tolerated by your father," he said. Not the same thing. Later that day, I watched him cross the living room to answer the door. It was a UPS delivery. A small brown box he signed for himself and carried upstairs without once touching the cane that was propped by his rocking chair. I only caught it because I happened to glance up from my phone. He moved fine. Better than fine. He moved like a man who'd been performing frailty for an audience, and the audience had just left the building. I told myself it was nothing. Older people have good days and bad days. Maybe the cold made his hip act up, and maybe today his hip felt fine. I made myself a cup of the coffee he'd ground and didn't ask any more questions, because some small, self-protective part of me didn't want to know the answer. That denial lasted exactly 1 more day. On the morning of December 23rd, I got up early to look for the extra phone charger I thought I'd left in my dad's office. A small room off the garage that doubles as storage for the stuff nobody wants to deal with. The door was open a crack. I heard drawers. I pushed it open and found my grandfather sitting at my father's desk, a locked filing cabinet pulled open beside him, a cabinet I'd never once seen unlocked in my life, with a fan of manila folders spread across the blotter like a card game. "Close the door, Avery." I closed it. My heart was doing something strange. A fast, uneven knock against my ribs. "What are you doing in Dad's office?" "Sit down," he said. And it wasn't a request. It was the voice of a man who had run a company with 40 employees for 3 decades. I sat. He slid a folder across the desk. Bank statements. Charter Oak Federal Credit Union, an account in Walter R. Higgins's name, the one that held what remained of his retirement after the sale of the business, recurring withdrawals going back 4 years. $1,800 here, $3,200 there. $6,500 in a single transaction 11 months ago, wired to an account belonging to Voss Financial Consulting LLC, my father's company. Next folder, a property deed for Grandpa's condo, with a quitclaim amendment dated 14 months ago, transferring partial ownership to my parents. A document that required Grandpa's signature. His signature was on it. It looked almost right. Almost. "That's not how I sign my R," he said, tapping the page. "Look at the loop. I haven't made an R like that since 1988. My hands had started shaking before I even understood why. I turned the next page. Checks. Actual canceled checks. Images pulled from an online banking portal. Written from Grandpa's account. Made out to cash. Endorsed on the back in handwriting that wasn't his. Deposited into an account with my mother's maiden name still attached to it from before she married Dad. They'd been robbing him for years," I said out loud, and it came out sounding stupid, like I was reading a headline from someone else's life. "For 4 years, 3 months, and change," Grandpa said, "if we're being precise. I like being precise." I sat there with the folder open on my knees, my stomach dropping through the floor, and I asked the only question that made sense to me. "Why show me this?" He looked at me for a long moment, the kind of look that made me feel like I was being appraised. Not unkindly, just accurately. "Because they think you're weak," he said. "Because you're the one who apologizes first in every argument, the one who canceled her own trip to come sit with an old man they didn't want to deal with themselves. They think that makes you nothing." He tapped the folder once, hard. "I think it makes you useful. There's a difference between weak and quiet, Avery. Your parents have never once told them apart. Does anyone else know?" I asked. "The bank suspects something. There's a fraud flag on 2 of the larger transfers already, sitting unresolved. My attorney, a man named Elliot Marsh, suspects more. He's been asking me pointed questions for a year that I haven't been ready to answer. But suspicion isn't proof. No one has proof." He closed the folder gently, like he was closing a casket. "Now someone does." I thought about my parents standing at some gate in JFK a few hours earlier, boarding a flight to Europe with money that wasn't theirs, and something in me went very cold and very still. "They'll say I forced you into this," I said slowly. "They'll say you're confused, that I manipulated a sick old man. That's exactly what they'll say. Let them try." His eyes didn't waver from mine. "I was signing 7-figure supply contracts before your father learned to parallel park. I have a full neuropsychological evaluation on file from 6 weeks ago, requested by me, administered by an independent physician, showing I'm sharper than 80% of 40-year-olds. I know precisely what I'm doing, and I have known precisely what I was doing since the day I noticed the first missing $800. I believed him instantly, completely, and that terrified me more than the folder ever could, because it meant this wasn't a spontaneous discovery. It meant he'd been sitting in that rocking chair for months, maybe years, watching, gathering, waiting for the one person in this family who might actually help him instead of helping herself. He'd been waiting for me. I tried that first night to talk myself out of it. I lay in my old childhood bedroom staring at the ceiling and built the defense my parents would build if they were standing in this room instead of me. Dad's a financial planner. Maybe this is some legitimate elder care structuring thing. Maybe there's a reasonable explanation for the transfers. Maybe I'm about to blow up my family over paperwork I don't understand. Quick pause. If you want more stories like this in better quality, my Spotify's linked in the description. I got up at midnight and went back downstairs. Grandpa was awake, of course, a single lamp burning, a legal pad on his knee. "I want to see the medical forms," I said. "The ones with Mom's signature you mentioned." He didn't ask why. He just reached into a second folder. He had a system, everything labeled in his small, careful handwriting, and handed me 2 documents, a HIPAA authorization form and a physician's request for a competency evaluation, both dated 8 months ago, both bearing what was supposed to be Grandpa's signature. Both, he told me, forged, filed with his primary care doctor's office by my mother, in an attempt, and I read the actual language on the form myself, in black and white, to have him evaluated for guardianship proceedings. They'd tried to get him declared incompetent. While he was, by every account and every test on record, entirely sound of mind, so they could take legal control of everything he had left. My stomach didn't just drop that time. It hollowed out completely. I actually had to sit down on the bottom stair. "Why didn't you go to the police the day you found out?" I asked. "Because an accusation from an old man against his own son gets filed under family dispute and forgotten in a drawer," he said. "Because I needed a paper trail thick enough that no lawyer on earth could argue it away, and because," he paused, and for the first time all night his voice lost its steadiness, just slightly, just at the edges, "because because I wanted to believe I was wrong. I gave them opportunities to stop. They never stopped. They accelerated. I went back to bed that night and didn't sleep. Every attempt I'd ever made to rationalize the strange comments, the guilty phone calls, the truck Caleb couldn't afford, all of it collapsed under the weight of what I now knew was sitting in a locked cabinet 20 feet from my bedroom door. On December 24th, I did the thing I now recognize as my last real attempt to fix this quietly. Before it became what it became, I called my mother. She picked up on the second ring, wine noise in the background, some cobblestone street in Lyon or Vienna or wherever they'd landed. "Avery, we're having the best time. You would not believe the market here. Mom, I need to ask you something." Something in my voice must have registered because the wind noise dropped, like she'd stepped into a doorway. "What's wrong? Is Grandpa okay? Why did you file a competency evaluation request on Grandpa in April?" Silence. Real silence. The kind that tells you more than any answer could. Then, "Where did you get that idea? Has he been saying things to you?" "Avery, sweetheart, he's not always reliable lately. That's exactly why we needed you there. I've seen the forms, Mom. I've seen the checks. You went through his private paperwork?" "Avery, that is such a violation of his privacy, honestly. I'm shocked. It's not his paperwork. It's Dad's office. And it's Grandpa's money going into accounts with your name on them. You don't understand the family finances," she said, and her voice had shifted into the register I'd know anywhere, the one she used on customer service reps and on me since I was 11 years old. Sweet, patient, and absolutely immovable. "We manage things for him. He gets confused about numbers sometimes. This is a whole conversation we should have as a family, not over the phone while I'm trying to enjoy 1 week of vacation. He's not confused, Mom. He had a competency evaluation done himself 6 weeks ago. Independent doctor. He passed everything." Another silence, shorter this time and colder. "Don't let him poison you against us, Avery. He does this. He did it to your Aunt Carol before she stopped speaking to him. You're the only one who still listens to him, and I think that says more about you than it does about him." She hung up before I could answer. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the phone onto the kitchen floor, and it skittered under the table where Grandpa was sitting, watching me with an expression I can only describe as sad and unsurprised at the same time. "She'll say I'm dramatic," I told him, my voice cracking. "She always says I'm dramatic. She's been saying it for years because it's worked for years," he said quietly. "It only works on people who are still trying to be loved by her. Are you still trying?" I didn't answer him. I don't think I had an answer yet, but something in me had already started to change shape. The next 4 days, we worked like we were running a small, quiet operation. Although, as Grandpa reminded me more than once, dryly, everything we did was completely, boringly legal. On December 26th, we drove to Hartford to meet with Elliot Marsh, Grandpa's estate attorney of 11 years, a soft-spoken man in his 60s with reading glasses pushed up into gray hair and a corner office that smelled like old paper and stronger coffee than mine. Marsh had already flagged irregularities on his own. He told me in front of Grandpa that he'd twice asked Walter directly whether he was aware of certain withdrawals, and twice been told to let it be for now. "Now is over," Grandpa told him, and slid the folder across the desk. Marsh spent 40 minutes going through it in near silence, occasionally making a small sound in his throat that I came to understand meant this is worse than I thought. Then he picked up his phone and called Dr. Priya Nadir, the geriatric neuropsychologist who'd conducted Grandpa's independent competency evaluation 6 weeks earlier, and asked her to fax over a certified copy for the file. Chain of custody, he called it, so no one could later claim the report had been altered or fabricated after the fact. Dr. Nadir's report, when it came through, was 14 pages and unambiguous. Full orientation, intact executive function, memory scores in the 88th percentile for his age bracket. Grandpa wasn't declining. He'd never been declining. He'd been building a case. We spent that afternoon in Marsh's office rewriting Grandpa's will and revocable trust from the ground up, with 2 independent witnesses present and the entire meeting recorded on video. Marsh's standard practice, he explained, specifically for situations exactly like this one, where a family member might later try to claim undue influence. Every asset Grandpa owned, the retirement accounts, the condo, an investment portfolio I hadn't even known existed, went into an irrevocable trust, locked from any future access by my parents, administered by Marsh's firm, with quarterly reporting requirements built in. Then Marsh made 2 more calls. One to the Fraud Investigations Division at Charter Oak Federal Credit Union, where a case officer named Rosa Delgado, she introduced herself with her badge number, which struck me as strange and formal until I understood later exactly why that mattered, opened a formal file on the withdrawal pattern, cross-referencing the forged endorsements against handwriting samples Grandpa provided on the spot. The second call went to the Hartford County District Attorney's Office. Marsh spoke to an assistant DA named Gregory Ostrander, who specialized, it turned out, in elder financial exploitation cases, a growing specialty, Marsh told me quietly while we waited on hold, because it was a growing crime. Ostrander asked us to send everything: the forged deed, the canceled checks, the fraudulent competency filing, the bank statements. Exhibit A through, eventually, Exhibit H. "This is a lot of paperwork for one Christmas," I said, half to myself, sitting in the parking garage afterward with my hands still cold despite the car's heater blasting. "This is 4 years of paperwork," Grandpa said. "You're just seeing all of it at once." By December 30th, the accounts were frozen. Not Grandpa Pause, my parents. The credit union, acting on Rosa Delgado's investigation and the trust restructuring Marsh had filed, froze every account connected to the fraudulent transfers pending review, which included, we learned with a kind of grim satisfaction, 2 of my father's business accounts that had commingled funds from Grandpa's retirement withdrawals with client money, a detail that would matter enormously and badly for my father, because commingling client funds is its own separate catastrophe for a financial consultant, license ending on its own, even before you add fraud on top. The DA's office moved fast, faster than I expected. Ostrander told Marsh they intended to have papers ready, a subpoena for my father's business records, a formal notice regarding the fraudulent competency filing against my mother, before my parents even landed back in the country. I had, by my count, about 18 hours before they walked back through that door, and one impossible question I couldn't shake. What was I supposed to do with the version of my family I still, somewhere stupid and stubborn in me, wanted to believe in? I didn't sleep the night of the 30th. I sat at the kitchen table with the red folder Grandpa had assembled, copies of everything, organized, tabbed, ready. And I thought about the 11 phone calls in November. Please come home. It won't be the same without you. I thought about how easily I'd believed that meant something. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, not dramatically, just a fine, constant tremor, like a phone on silent buzzing against a table. I made tea I didn't drink. I reread the note on the coffee table, "Don't be dramatic," until the words stopped looking like words. At 6 in the morning, Grandpa found me still sitting there. "You don't have to be in the room when they get here," he said. "I can handle this alone." "No," I said, and I meant it in a way that surprised me. "I want to be in the room." He nodded once, like that was the correct answer, and set 2 mugs of coffee down on the table without another word. They came home on New Year's Eve, a week early, dragging suitcases full of Harris souvenirs through a front door that, unbeknownst to them, now belonged to a trust that didn't include their names anywhere on the paperwork. Mom's scream started before she even got the door fully open. She'd tried her credit card at the airport parking garage, and it had been declined, and I think some animal part of her already knew, walking up that driveway, that something had gone very wrong. Her Paris coat still smelled like airport perfume when she stormed into the entryway. Dad went gray, actually gray, the color draining out of his face in real time, reading a sheriff's notice taped to the inside of the door, left there that morning by a deputy serving the subpoena on behalf of the DA's office. Caleb shoved past both of them, dropped an armful of duty-free shopping bags on the floor, and looked around at the house like it had personally betrayed him. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded. Mom's finger snapped toward me, shaking. "You. What did you do?" I opened the red folder. "Your accounts are frozen," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I felt. "The credit union flagged the withdrawals from Grandpa's retirement fund. Officer Delgado has an active fraud case open. Dad, your firm got subpoenaed this morning. Some of those checks ran straight through your consulting business accounts, which means client funds are commingled with what you took, and that's its own violation. Mom, your name is on 2 forged medical forms, a HIPAA release and a competency evaluation request, filed without Grandpa's knowledge or consent. That is private family business," my father said, his voice climbing. "Fraud isn't private," Grandpa said. He was still in the rocking chair by the fire, and he hadn't raised his voice once. Mom's tone shifted instantly, dropping into that soft, reasonable register she'd used on the phone. "Dad, you don't understand what she's telling you. She's being dramatic. We were managing things for you, that's all this ever was." "You were stealing," Grandpa said. Dad's jaw tightened so hard I could see the muscle jump. "Careful, old man, careful." For the first time, something sharpened in Grandpa's voice, though it never rose above a normal conversational volume. "I was careful for 40 years while you spent money you never earned. I watched you build a business on my name and my credit and my patience." "I'm done being careful, Richard," Caleb laughed, a sharp, nervous bark of a sound, the laugh of someone standing on ice that's already cracking. "This is insane. You're old, Grandpa. You don't even know what you're signing half the time." "He knows exactly what he signed," I said. "There's a full neuropsychological evaluation on file from an independent physician, dated 6 weeks ago. There's a recorded meeting with 2 witnesses and a certified attorney. There's a medical evaluator's report entered as evidence." Dad lunged toward me, hand out for the folder. I stepped back before I'd even fully decided to. Grandpa struck his cane once against the hardwood floor, a single sharp crack that stopped everyone in the room cold. 2 police officers stepped into the hallway from the kitchen, where they'd been waiting quietly, at Grandpa's invitation, since before my parents' car had even pulled into the driveway. My mother's mouth fell open and produced no sound at all. My father froze mid-step, one hand still stretched toward a folder he was never going to reach. "I invited them," Grandpa said, calm as still water. "They have questions about forged signatures, elder financial exploitation, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Detective Marcus Feld is heading the case, 17 years with the Hartford County Fraud Unit. He'll want to speak with each of you individually, I'd imagine, given the commingled business accounts." Caleb stumbled backward into the Christmas tree the housekeeper had put up for us that morning, and 3 glass ornaments shattered on the floor, bright shards scattering across the hardwood, like something breaking open that had been sealed for a very long time. Mom started crying then, not from guilt. I want to be clear. I've watched this woman cry my entire life, and I know the difference. Tears were always her sharpest weapon, the thing she reached for the instant logic failed her. "Avery," she whispered, reaching a hand toward me. "Please, we're your family." I held the folder tighter against my chest. "No," I said. "You left me here to be useful. Turns out I was just not the way you meant. Grandpa looked past all of them, at the sheriff's notice still hanging crooked on the front door, and then back at the family that had built its entire comfortable, expensive, gray-toned life on stealing from an old man they'd assumed was too weak, too old, and too frail to notice. And she was, he said quietly. She was exactly the kind of useful you should have been afraid of. The consequences, once they started, didn't stop for months. My father's financial consulting license was suspended within 6 weeks, pending the outcome of the fraud investigation, and formally revoked the following spring after Detective Feld's unit confirmed the commingled accounts and matched the forged endorsements to a handwriting sample Dad had, stupidly, provided voluntarily in an early cooperative interview, thinking it would make him look innocent. It did the opposite. My mother was charged with 2 counts of forgery related to the fraudulent competency filing. Her attorney negotiated a plea, probation, restitution, mandatory financial counseling, rather than risk a trial with Dr. Nadir's evaluation sitting in evidence, unshakable and clean. Caleb, it turned out, hadn't known the full extent of it, though he'd known about the truck. He and I don't talk much these days, but we talk. He moved out of the house that spring and got a job at a warehouse outside Hartford, which is honestly more self-sufficiency than I ever expected from him. My parents are still married, technically, living in a smaller rental across town, restitution payments eating a chunk of whatever they can still earn. I saw my mother once, at a gas station in March. She looked at me like she wanted to say something. I got in my car instead. Grandpa still lives in the same condo, still grinds his own coffee every morning, still moves faster than he lets most people see. I visit him most Sundays now. Not because anyone's making me, because I want to. Last week, over coffee, I asked him something I'd been sitting on since that first night by the lamp. Would you have shown me the folder if I hadn't come? If I'd called that Uber back to the airport? He thought about it longer than I expected. No, he said finally. I'd have found another way, but I'm glad I didn't have to.